Okay, here's our second part of the prologue. Now I have one radio phonograph. I plan to have 5. There's a certain acoustical deadness in my hull, and when I have music, I want to feel its vibration, not only with my ear, but with my whole body. I'd like to hear 5 recordings of Louis Armstrong playing and singing "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue" all at the same time. Sometimes now I listen to Louis when I have my favorite dessert of vanilla ice cream and sloe gin. I pour the red liquid over the white mound, watching it glisten and vapor rising as Louis bends that military instrument into a beam of lyrical sound. Now, this song, "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue?" Louis Armstrong was a black man. You should look it up on YouTube. It's a really great song. And if he's singing "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue?" Well, he's a black man, blue meaning that he's sad. But black and blue is also the color you are when you're beaten up, right? So, and he has made poetry out of being invisible. That's what Ellison is saying. So Louis Armstrong is experiencing the same invisibility as Ellison is as well. Perhaps I like Louis Armstrong because he's made poetry out of being invisible. I think it must be because he's unaware that he is invisible. And my own grasp of visibility aids me to understand his music. Once when I asked for a cigarette, some jokers gave me a reefer, so they gave me marijuana, which I lighted when I got home and sat listening to my phonograph. It was a strange evening. Invisibility, let me explain, gives one a slightly different sense of time. You're never quite on the beat. Sometimes you're ahead and sometimes you're behind. Instead of the swift and imperceptible flowing of time, you're aware of its nodes, those points where time stands still or from which it leaps ahead. And you slip into the breaks and look around. That's what you hear vaguely in Louis' music. Once I saw a prize fighter boxing a yokel, so like a really well-trained boxer finding somebody who they just like picked up off the streets. The fighter was swift and amazingly scientific. His body was one violent flow of rapid rhythm action. He hit the yokel 100 times while the yokel held up his arms in stunned surprise. But suddenly the yokel, rolling about in the gale of boxing gloves, struck one blow and knocked science, speed, and footwork as cold as a well-digger's posterior. Smart money hit the canvas. The long shot got the nod. The yokel had simply stepped inside of his opponent's sense of time. So under the spell of the reefer, I discovered a new analytical way of listening to music. The unheard sounds came through, and each melodic line existed of itself, stood out clearly from all the rest, and said its piece, and waited patiently for the other voices to speak. That night I found myself hearing not only in time, but in space as well. I not only entered the music, but descended like Dante into its depths. Now he's referring here to Dante's Inferno, and in Dante's Inferno there are different levels of hell. As you descend, each gets worse, and so Ellison is going to talk about a vision that he saw, a dream, a trip that he had, and it's going to be like Dante's levels of hell. So important to understand before we start reading this, okay? Beneath the swiftness of hot tempo, there was a slower tempo, and a cave, and I entered it and looked around, and heard an old woman singing a spiritual as full of Welschmerz as flamenco, and beneath that lay a still lower level on which I saw a beautiful girl, the color of ivory, pleading in a voice like my mother's as she stood before a group of slave owners who bid for her naked body. And below that I found a lower level on a more rapid tempo, and I heard someone shout. Brothers and sisters, my text this morning is the blackness of blackness. Now remember, we're descending into lower levels of hell here, okay? And a congregation of voices answered, that blackness is most black, brother, most black. In the beginning, at the very start, they cried, there was blackness, preach it. And the sun, Lord, was bloody red, red. Now black is, the preacher shouted, bloody. I said, black is, preach it, brother, and black ain't. Red, Lord, red. He said it's red. Amen. Black will get you. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. And black won't, not won't. It do, Lord, and it don't. Hallelujah. It'll put you, glory, glory, in my Lord in the whale's belly. So, here's a reference to Jonah in the belly of the whale, biblical reference. Preach it, dear brother, and make you tempt. Good God Almighty, old Aunt Nellie, black will make you black, or black will unmake you. Ain't it the truth, Lord? So black will make you, or black will unmake you. Interesting thought, right? Something to keep in mind as we read further on. And at that point, a voice of trombone timbre screamed at me, get out of here, you fool. Is you ready to commit treason? So committing treason is it's a crime against your country, right? It's basically trying to break your country apart or something like that, or do something to harm the entire country. And so treason's not just a crime, it's a big crime against an entire nation. And so using the word treason here, Ellison is setting the black people apart as their own nation, as their own entity of people. And I tore myself away, hearing the old singer of spirituals moan, "Go curse your God, boy, and die." I stopped and questioned her, asked her what was wrong. "I dearly love my master's son," she said. "You should have hated him," I said. "He gave me several sons," she said, "and because I love my sons, I learned to love their father, though I hated him too." And as you guys know from studying history, that white slave owners would often have sex with their black slaves, and whether that could be consensual or not, I don't, probably not. And so, but she learned to love him because she loved her sons. Okay. I too have become acquainted with ambivalence, I said. "That's why I'm here." "What's that?" "Nothing, a word that doesn't explain it." "Why do you moan?" "I moan this way 'cause he's dead," she said. "Then tell me, who's that laughing upstairs?" "Them's my sons. They glad." "Yes, and I can understand that too," I said. "I laughs too, but I moans too. He promised to set us free, but he can never bring himself to do it. Still, I loved him." "Loved him? You mean—" "Oh, yes, but I loved something else even more." "What more?" "Freedom." "Freedom," I said. "Maybe freedom lies in hating." "No, son, it's in loving. I loved him and give him the poison, and he withered away like a frostbit apple. Them boys would have tore him to pieces with their homemade knives." So she killed him, but to keep him from being murdered by their sons. "A mistake was made somewhere," I said. "I'm confused." And I wished to say other things, but the laughter upstairs became too loud and moan-like for me, and I tried to break out of it, but I couldn't. Just as I was leaving, I felt an urgent desire to ask her what freedom was, and went back. She sat with her head in her hands, moaning softly. Her leather-brown face was filled with sadness. "Old woman, what's this freedom you love so well?" I asked her around a corner of my mind. She looked surprised, then thoughtful, then baffled. "I done forgot, son. It's all mixed up. First I think it's one thing, then I think it's another. It gets my head to spinning. I guess now it ain't nothing but knowing how to say what I got up in my head. But it's a hard job, son. Too much has done happened to me in too short a time. It's like I have a fever. Every time I start to walk, my head gets to swirling and I fall down. Or if it ain't that, it's the boys. They get to laughing and I want to kill up the white folks. They's bitter. That's what they is. But what about freedom? Leave me alone, boy. My head aches." I left her feeling dizzy. I didn't get far. This conversation of freedom is going to come up over and over again. Like, what exactly is freedom? Is it the freedom to be able to do what you want? Freedom to be able to think what you want? Is freedom being equal to everyone else? And so this question of freedom is going to come up a lot in this novel. I left her feeling dizzy myself. I didn't get far. Suddenly one of the sons, a big fellow, 6 feet tall, appeared out of nowhere and struck me with his fist. "What's the matter, man?" I cried. You made Ma cry." "But how?" I said, dodging a blow. "Asking her them questions, that's how. Get out of here and stay, and next time you got questions like that, ask yourself." He held me in a grip like cold stone, his fingers fastening upon my windpipe until I thought I'd suffocate before he finally allowed me to go. I stumbled about dazed, the music beating hysterically in my ears. It was dark, my head cleared, and I wandered down a dark, narrowing passage, thinking I heard his footsteps hurrying behind me. I was sore, and into my being had come a profound craving for tranquillity, for peace and quiet, a state I felt I could never achieve. For one thing, the trumpet was blaring and the rhythm was too hectic. A tom-tom, beating like heart thuds, began drowning out the trumpet, filling my ears. I longed for water, and I heard it rushing through the cold mane as my fingers touched as I felt my way. But I couldn't stop to search because of the footsteps behind me. "Hey, Raz," I called. "Is it you, Destroyer, Reinhardt?" No answer, only the rhythmic footsteps behind me. Once I tried crossing the road, but a speeding machine struck me, scraping the skin from my leg as it roared past. Then somehow I came out of it, ascending hastily from this underworld of sound, to hear Louis Armstrong innocently asking, "What did I do to be so black and blue?" At first I was afraid. This familiar music had demanded action, the kind of which I was incapable, and yet I had lingered there beneath the surface I might have attempted to act. Nevertheless, I know now that few really listen to this music. I sat on the chair's edge in a soaking sweat, as though each of the 1,369 bulbs had every one become a Klieg light in an individual setting for a third degree with Raz and Reinhardt in exchange. or in charge, excuse me. And you guys, the Klieg lights are the ones like in the old detective movies where they shine them on the person who's being questioned, you know. It was exhausting, as though I'd held my breath continuously for an hour under the terrifying serenity that comes from days of intense hunger. And yet it was a strangely satisfying experience for an invisible man to hear the silence of sound. I'd discovered unrecognized compulsions in my being, even though I could not answer yes to their promptings. I haven't smoked a reefer since, however, not because they're illegal, but because to see around corners is enough. That's not unusual when you're invisible, but to hear around them is too much. It inhibits action. And despite Brother Jack and all that sad lost period of the Brotherhood, I believe in nothing if not in action. So hearing around corners and seeing around corners, kind of like eavesdropping, right? Like, they don't know you're there, but you still hear it, and you still see it, and you still know what's going on. Please, a definition. A hibernation is a covert preparation for a more overt action. Besides, the drug destroys one's sense of time completely. If that happened, I might forget to dodge some bright warning, and some cluck would run me down with an orange and yellow streetcar or a bilious bus. Or I might forget to leave my hole when the moment for action presents itself. Meanwhile, I enjoy my life with the compliments of monopolated light and power. Since you never recognize me even when in closest contact with me, and since, no doubt, you'll hardly believe that I exist, it won't matter if you know that I tapped a power line leading into the building and ran it into my hole in the ground. Before that I lived in darkness, into which I was chased, but now I see. I've illuminated the blackness of my invisibility, and vice versa. And so I play the invisible music of my isolation. The last statement doesn't seem just right, does it? But it is. You hear this music simply because music is heard and seldom seen, except by musicians. Could this compulsion to put invisibility down in black and white be thus an urge to make music of invisibility? But I'm an orator, a rabble-rouser. I was, and perhaps shall be again. Who knows? All sickness is not unto death, and neither is invisibility. I can hear you say, what a horrible, irresponsible bastard. And you're right. I leap to agree with you. I'm one of the most irresponsible beings that ever lived. Irresponsibility is part of my invisibility. Any way you face it's a denial. But to whom can I be responsible, and why should I be when you refuse to see me? So again, he's not talking about actually physically being invisible, right? He's talking about the fact that society doesn't recognize him. He's not recognizing society, so why should he be responsible if people are not going to see him and recognize him and actually interact with him as a human being, okay? And wait till I reveal how truly irresponsible I am. Responsibility rests upon recognition, and recognition's a form of agreement. Take the man who I almost killed. Who was responsible for the near murder? I don't think so, and I refuse it. I won't buy it. You can't give it to me. He bumped me. He insulted me. Shouldn't he, for his own personal safety, have recognized my hysteria, my danger potential? He, let's say, was lost in a dream world. But didn't he control that dream world, which, alas, was only too real? And didn't he rule me out of it? And if he had yelled for a policeman, wouldn't I have been taken for the offending one? Yes, let me agree with you. I was the irresponsible one, for I should have used my knife to protect the higher interests of society. Someday that kind of foolishness will cause us tragic trouble. All dreamers and sleepwalkers must pay the price, and even the invisible victims responsible for the fate of all. But I shirked that responsibility. I became too snarled in the incompatible notions that buzzed within my brain. I was a coward. But what did I do to be so blue? Bear with me.